I think it's time we talked about the connection between sound, pitch, and frequency. I have an amplifier, which will be running alternating current through a homemade speaker. My homemade speaker is quite simple. I have a coil right in there, and my coil is attached to a cone. I've attached my wires to the coil, so my alternating current will be going in, which will be alternating the north and the south magnetic poles of this electromagnet. And I will be putting a magnet near it. So let's put a magnet right in there. I'll just leave it. My magnet won't move, it's pretty heavy, but my cone should move as my current alternates. Let's put some current into our speaker. You should just be able to hear a high-pitched sound. And that was the sound of 880 hertz. Let's go all the way down to maybe 100 hertz. And let's try, I'm going to keep lowering the frequency now. Now you can actually see it shaking. And around 20 hertz, the tone, the pitch itself starts to become difficult for us to tell. And it's still actually moving. But at 3 hertz, our ears don't register it. Let's try going back up again. And so on. Let's take a look. I've got my frequency set at 2 hertz, and let's see how our speaker moves. And if I hold the magnet, I can really make it obvious. And now let's change something else. Let's change the voltage. Right now it's set at 1 volt. Let's up it to 5 volts. And you can see by changing the voltage, I've added more current. It's still alternating at the same frequency, and you can see that my cup moves further. Let's repeat this at a frequency that we can actually hear. I'll choose something random. Here is 300 hertz. And let's go back to 1 volt, and let's listen. Very quiet. Let's change it to 5 volts. Let's change it to 10. You should hear that as we increase the motion of an object, as we increase the force of its collisions with the air, we end up with larger sounds. And what we're doing is we're creating larger disturbances in the air, larger pressures, and we would say that we are creating sound waves with larger amplitudes. So amplitude for a sound wave corresponds to volume. Some of you who play music might have heard the term A440. Well, that's because if we put in a frequency of 440 hertz into anything, absolutely shake anything that will bump our air and make it collide 440 times a second, we produce the note A. And if I double that frequency, 880, I produce something that's exactly an octave higher. So if I want to create sound, I need to smash and move the air in some way. Something like this, my string is smashing over and over and moving air molecules, which creates sound waves, which eventually are moving our eardrums and causing us to experience sound. As we saw before, this is just a long string, and when I pluck it, it vibrates in its fundamental or first harmonic frequency. If I pluck a bigger string, a thicker string, there are different forces in this one, and because it's heavier and it takes more to accelerate back and forth, its first harmonic is a slower frequency, a lower frequency, and I get a lower sounding note. And this one is thicker still, and that one is lower still. So anything that disturbs the air in a repetitive way will have a fundamental pitch. So even a car with its engine and its pistons going up and down is shaking, and it will be colliding with air molecules, which will be sending sound waves which reach your ears. And you will often hear cars starting quite low, 30, 40 hertz, a low rumbling. And then as they speed up and the pistons speed up and the shaking increases, you will hear the pitch rise. Anything at all. There is a change of medium over here. This actually acts like a spot in which waves, some of them, will be reflected backwards, and standing waves are generated inside even a tube like this. And they will be the kinds that have the open end, so that waves are flipping in slightly different ways, but the same principle is there. I have reflected waves adding up to other waves, causing a single common frequency, which your ears hear as a note. Almost anything works. My favorite one is the common saw. And if I bend it in a nice way, you can make even a saw into an instrument. There's a difference between objects that can sustain vibrations and objects that can't. And we can hear the difference right away. So most of them, if you hit them in some way, you will cause waves. And there's a chance you might actually have a harmonic wave developing, and therefore you do hear a pitch. Even this actually is a harmonic wave. This flower right here is fixed at the bottom and open-ended at the top. And what we primarily see there is the first harmonic standing wave. Lots of objects simply cannot sustain the vibrations necessary in order to produce a repeating wave, which is what we hear as notes or pitch. Then all we're hearing is the initial wave pulses as you rattle the object, and it smashes the air very briefly, but those pulses die out, and we tend to think of it as noise, unless you're a drummer.